Good afternoon. Welcome to the second session of Containers India. For the participants and panelists who joined just now, Containers India is an annual conference being organized by Maritime Gateway for the last 9 years in association with Container Shipping Lines. So today, the theme for this conference is Rebound and Refocus. We almost have come out of the pandemic. Now businesses started resuming. Exports and imports have shown growth, and all the global financial entities are estimating good GDP growth for India. So all these are good signs that things would be normal in the near future. So before I invite the panelists for the second session, I have a couple of announcements. This morning we have shown a presentation, Indian Container Market 2021. This report is available for a free download from our website www.maritimegateway.com, which contains a lot of these 2021 container figures and the terminal's performance and the shipping lines performance as well. So that is one. Second thing, all the participants are encouraged to post their questions in the Q&A box so that I can take up during the discussion. With these two announcements, it's my pleasure to invite a galaxy of expert panelists that are with us today. In a couple of minutes, I'll take to introduce them. We have Mike Formoso. Mike is the Managing Director of PSA India and is responsible for business operations and development of PSA's 4 container terminals and related companies in India. Mike has worked in the container terminal industry for his entire career, and before moving to India in 2015, has been based in Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and the UK. He has worked in a variety of roles ranging from management trainee through business development, commercial and project management roles, leading to development and startup of Vietnam's first deep sea container terminal. Welcome, Mike. Our next guest is Mr. Aditya Chaudhary. He is presently working as Vice President, Corporate Affairs, HR and Company Secretary of the National Industrial Corridor Development Corporation, NICDC Limited. And he is also Director at NLDSL, which is a joint venture between NICDC and NEC India. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India and is a gold medalist in law. He has worked in different domains and with various multinational companies, over 17 years of experience. He has experience in strategic planning and management, secretarial and legal matters, project financing, private-public partnership projects, corporate governance, and exposure of dealing with various government departments and organizations. He has also been nominated as a director on board of various special purpose vehicles and joint venture companies with the state governments. Additionally, in the recent times, Mr. Chaudhary has very successfully spearheaded the launch and management of the much propagated and discussed Prime Minister's Gati Shakti, the National Master Plan for the Integrated Multimodal Logistics. Welcome to the conference, Mr. Aditya Chaudhary. Then we have Mr. Shankar Shinde, Chairman of Federation of Freight Forwarders Association in India, FFAI. He is the Managing Director of Global Express Multi Logistics Private Limited, a global group established for the business of custom broker logistics and international freight forwarding. He has been acting as President of Nashik Custom House Agents Association since 2004. Mr. Shinde has also worked as President of the Indian Institute of Freight Forwarders, IIFF, previously. Welcome, Shankar Shinde ji. And we have Umesh Grover, a well-known face on the horizon of Indian maritime industry. Mr. Umesh Grover, Secretary General of Container Freight Stations Association of India, has been around in the shipping and logistics industry for over 45 years. And is a former director on board of Shipping Corporation of India and also former CEO of Indian National Shipowners Association, INSA. A mariner by profession, he served as chief engineer on SCI ships. During his long career, he held several key posts like head global container business of SCI, and as director of SCI, he is responsible for all the new projects, offshore division, IT, and business development. Mr. Grover has been associated with various infra projects in port and terminal development. He is a former trustee on the board of JNPT and Tuticorin Port Trust. He was the chairman of Governing Council of Narottam Morarji Institute of Shipping for 8 years till 2015. We have one more guest yet to join, Satish Kumar. Maybe I will welcome him later. So, gentlemen, welcome to the panel discussion. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining this discussion. So this session is focused on the changing landscape, policy, infrastructure. So when I say infrastructure, it is both physical and digital infrastructure. So how things are changing, what are the policy changes that have come recently, and what are the infrastructure developments that are happening in our industry. So let me begin with Mr. Aditya Chaudhary. The reason being, I've seen that he has been instrumental in the PM Gati Shakti master plan and integrated multimodal logistics. So, Mr. Aditya Chaudhary, can you walk us through what is this Gati Shakti as far as our logistics industry is concerned? We have seen some numbers and some announcements, but ultimately, how the infrastructure landscape is going to change.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this August gathering. As far as the PM Gati Shakti is concerned, every single department in the government of India, as well as the state government and at the ULB level, was so far working in silos. So the whole objective of PM Gati Shakti is to first of all break the silos and establish a synchronization between the workings of the various departments of the government of India, and also take the state governments and the local bodies along right from the stage of the planning till the stages of the implementation and actual execution. So as part of the PM Gati Shakti, what we have done, we have just mapped all the infrastructure interventions which has already taken place in the country and which are going to be took place in the next 4 to 5 years. And we have just mapped it on a GIS based platform with over 200 plus layers. So just to elaborate it in a very layman's language, so far the approach was very reactive in nature. So Gati Shakti is going to change that reactive based approach to a proactive based approach. I'll give a very small example of the shipping sector. We always used to plan for a port, we construct the port, but we don't plan for the road connectivity, we don't plan for the rail connectivity. So moving forward, the shipping ministry, whenever they are planning for a new port infrastructure, the connectivity infrastructure, which is the road, rail, or any other connectivity which is required for the purpose of evacuating the goods from the port, that also will be planned simultaneously. So it will not be like once the port start operational and after that there is a choking happening at the port gates, then only we will be planning for converting a 2-lane road into a 4-lane road, and similarly planning a rail connectivity which is coming, say, after 5 years of the port coming into operation. So PM Gati Shakti, different departments of the government of India, different departments of state government will work together right from the planning stage so that the actual completion timelines of different projects of road connectivity or rail connectivity or the port execution will end up simultaneously. So there should not be any time lapse between the completion of different projects being executed by different agencies. So in terms of logistic efficiency, it will bring in huge visibility for anybody who is doing business in India and who is proposing to do business in India, because so far there is no visibility about the availability of roads, railways, the port infrastructure, the multimodal connectivity infrastructure. With this, there will be complete visibility about different modes of transportation. On the top of the infrastructure layers, we have also mapped various economic zones where the actual manufacturing, actual industrial activity is happening. For example, the electronic manufacturing cluster, the pharmaceutical clusters, the textile parks, the fishing clusters, agro-processing zones, all that has been mapped as part of the National Master Plan. So this is going to impact the whole country, and it will, to my mind, will change the entire logistic landscape of the country and will bring in a lot of cost efficiencies, which our country will realize in the years to come.
Thank you very much, Abhishek ji. So just a small announcement, Mr. Satish Kumar Reddy is online. He has trouble with his video, but audio can be heard. Good afternoon, Satish Kumar Reddy. Welcome to the panel discussion. I'll be bringing you into the discussion a little later. Thank you very much for this insight into Gati Shakti rollout and the idea behind it. Now I want Umesh, Mike, and Shankar to respond on this, because each of them are involved with a different kind of infrastructure. Mike being a terminal operator, and Umesh ji is into CFS network, and Shankar is the provides a lot of logistic services through freight forwarding. So we have been discussing about these gap areas in infrastructure for quite long in India, and as you rightly commented on the being silos, and port is planned and connectivity is not there, so these kind of issues. So I want each of them to reflect what is the current status and what is expected out of Gati Shakti as a stakeholder, starting with Umesh ji.
You need to unmute, sir.
You are on mute, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ramprasad, and all my dear friends, Mike, Abhishek, Shankar Bhai, Satish, whom I haven't met, Madhukar. First of all, it's been a pleasure for me to be associated with Containers India for all this is the 9th session, and I've had the privilege to be there for all the sessions. And Abhishek, thanks a lot for giving us an insight into what exactly, explaining us in a very quick and a short and a very crisp manner. You're absolutely right. When the ports were developed, let's take JNPT when it came in 1989, it was conceptualized as a CFS-based model. And it started off with 1 million TEUs, 500,000 or 1 million, and there was a CFS inside the port. Then the need was felt, 3 more CFSs came, the government promoted these CFSs. Then the private partners came in and Maersk came in. Then the second terminal came and the number of CFSs went up. Then the third terminal came. In anticipation of the fourth terminal to come, which took about 8-9 years, lots of CFSs came because they saw it as an opportunity. And they also felt that the cargo needs to be evacuated, but the trade did not grow at the same pace. The terminal got delayed and there was a little bit of oversupply. I'm just talking about one sector. Let's take Mundra, or let's say Chennai, which are these ports, which already, Chennai and Calcutta already existed. And to get a CFS, to increase the volumes there, container freight stations were required because the port area is very less. Now let us look at that. Why do we need a CFS? Globally, if there's no CFS, why are we having it in India or in only in few countries? Let's come on to the concept of the containerized cargo. Nowhere in the world, the container delivery is taken another hook. It must move to a container yard, and then it must move to the storage yard or to a warehouse. If you take the ports of Rotterdam or Hamburg or something, the port area itself is so large that the containers are moved there, stacked over there, and the importers take the delivery. Secondly, in these ports, the type of goods which are imported and the trust what people had in the trade, custom intervention was the least amount. So no servicing of this cargo was required, and hence they were more efficient. Right? JNPT has say 50 kilometers of motorable area. Rotterdam had 350 kilometers. The containers did go and park somewhere before they went to the consignee. Or the consignee itself had a large warehouse, so it became a container freight station within the consignee's warehouse. India, the concept was different. India imports almost 35% of imports are scrap iron, waste, paper, scrap metal, which is a low value cargo, and the consignee is in no great hurry to take the cargo away. He keeps it in a container freight station, pays the ground rent, and in case the commodity value comes down, he abandons it. Of course, then there are a lot of structured cargoes. There are like IKEAs and Amazons, etc., who get their inventory, but they do not have large warehousing space. So they will keep it in the container freight station so that containers are secured, safe, because CFSs are a absolutely state-of-the-art cargo service stations, a short transit point. Coming back to Abhishek's point, when the cargo moves, I think the first speaker actually should have been Mike after Abhishek, because the first link is port or the terminal, and then it moves out to CFSs and then the road transportation and so on and so forth. But sorry, Mike, I jumped the gun and I came in a little earlier. So in case the ports are going to be planned, number one, the larger ports, if the areas are too large available within the port, perhaps the need of CFSs will not arise. But if the port area is less, you definitely need to have container freight stations, and you need to have ICDs en route hinterland location wherever you're going, so that cargo moves on a fastest way by rail or by road. Now coming to CFSs, the role of late has reduced because the customs have improved their processes. They've brought in what is known as direct port delivery from 2015 onwards, which went on from 8% to 55 to 60% today. And then there is risk management systems facilitated, which are a large number. From 45-50% has now gone up to 65 to 70%. So what does it translate to? That means lots of these cargoes do not require much servicing, the value-added services. But you'll be surprised that all the importers still trust CFSs for clearance of their cargoes, and perhaps they trust CFSs more than they trust themselves. So they're sure that the cargo will be cleared within 24 to 25 hours. It'll go to the CFS. It's lying secured, safe, and they could take delivery anytime. What to CFSs, what has happened is the volumes per se have not reduced, but the realization per TEU, which was say about 10,000 rupees earlier, has come down to probably 5,000, out of which your expenses are 4,500 rupees. You're left with about 500. In the morning session, Captain Tiwari mentioned that the shipping lines are going through hell. And people commented that if earning so much of freight is the hell, let us join that hell. And I wish as CFSs we could also join that hell and at least make a survival in that hell. Because for a lot of service providers, sustainability has become a problem, and container freight stations with their infrastructure which is available, we have been asking government, and we have made representations that allow them to do additional works, additional value-added services, MSME activities, barcoding, allow us to handle domestic cargo, like the ports handle both domestic and international cargo, without creating separate boundaries, but you can have virtual boundaries, and you can have a track of both the imported cargo and the domestic cargo. The Mumbai airport is an example, the new Navi Mumbai airport. A lot of air freight stations will be required. We are also representing the container freight stations which are close to the Panvel area, they could also double up as the air freight stations. So this is my opening remark. Only thing is, while the government has been assisting in ease of doing business and facilitating the importers and exporters, the service providers like the ports or the terminals or the ICDs or CFSs are being whipped. They are being put to additional scrutiny, which is going to cost additional money, and not the right platform to say, but we are going back to the license Raj, what was there a couple of years back. Unless this is corrected, the supply chain will pose a problem because CFSs are there to stay. The importers and exporters need them. And of course, the terminals, nobody can do without it. Thanks, Ram Prasad ji, for the time being.
Thank you, Umesh ji. Now I will invite Mike.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me, Ram Prasad and fellow panelists. Thank you very much also, Umesh, for the nice words about the challenge facing terminals. I think we're all in this together, really. And as a company that's been operating in India now for over 20 years, across 5 locations, 4 container terminals, and now 2 CFS locations, we're obviously getting into more of the areas. And topics such as regulatory, the Major Port Authorities Bill, infrastructure, how to make major ports more competitive, and of course, promoting multimodal transports are ones that we as PSA India pay a huge amount of attention to, given how much it can affect us. Our views haven't changed much on these topics over the years. We urge deregulation and a national master plan for all port development, not just major ports and private ports, to ensure the best use of resources, a level playing field, and the importance of creating supporting infrastructure, both physical and regulatory, and also ensuring an effective resolution mechanism for any issues that projects encounter. For the recent announcement of Gati Shakti, which, at least for the port sector, I'm sure it applies to the others as well, as it's included, it targets to cut logistics costs, increase cargo handling capacity, and reduce the turnaround time. Very laudable. But I think the port sector shouldn't be downbeaten by this, because there's already sufficient cargo handling capacity. The turnaround time and productivity is actually competitive on an international scale. If you allow me to segue a little, despite all the disruptions in schedules, terminals such as ours have been playing a huge role in helping carriers catch up their disrupted schedules, and so keeping the trade moving. Let me give you some data. In the first 8 months of this year, there were 321 container vessels handled at our Mumbai and Chennai terminals. 242, or 75% of them, arrived off schedule. But 199 of those, or 75% again, still got a berth on arrival. So calling us allowed them to catch up their schedule. So the maritime media may talk of port delays globally, but there's no reports of widespread delays in vessel handling here in India. And I think that's a credit to the entire ecosystem for making it happen, not just ports, but the CFSs, the companies that move the containers between the ports, and everybody involved. Now, coming to intermodalism and infrastructure, data from the Logistics Bank Data Bank shows that operators in major ports, such as ourselves, are delivering high levels of productivity, lower turnaround, shorter inland transit times than the non-major ports. Yet, I think there was a question this morning about why the major ports continue, or JNPT continues to lose market share to the non-major ports. A prime example is that the DFC's benefits are so far several years away at best for JNPT, despite a DFC compliant rail yard at PSA Mumbai. I think it appears on some of the slides behind me. All 6 kilometers plus of track and double height gantry cranes has already celebrated its 3rd anniversary. As the CEO of Niti Aayog said, while many economic zones, industrial parks, logistic hubs and ports were planned, they often suffered owing to inefficient multimodal connectivity. So I think the ideas included in Gati Shakti, as Abhishek mentioned, about planning all of the infrastructure together and consecutively is great. But the challenge is, and really, I think this is linked in some ways to the Major Ports Authority bill, that also takes major steps forward, at least in terms of the operations of the port trust themselves. But it doesn't materially alter the competitive position of them, and hence everybody downstream who is also involved, because there's practically no change for existing concessionaires in the Major Ports Authority bill, who day in, day out have been keeping India's trade moving, and like us, some of them for more than 20 years. So the material changes are actually reserved for the future. So my question would always be, we love the future plan, but how are we going to address the shortcomings in the interim, particularly when very large investments have gone in? So the fastest way to achieve quantifiable results in major ports would be through addressing current issues in the terminal, which would also address or translate into gains for future concessions. We're very happy to hear that there was a conciliation and settlement committee set up by the Ministry of Ports, Shippings and Inland Waterways. Alas, it hasn't yet held a meeting since its inception in pre-COVID days. Hopefully they haven't already reconciled, settled and committed to this outcome, if you'll excuse the wordplay there. So overall, I think if to make major ports competitive, more competitive, and also all of the then downstream ecosystem, deregulate and level the playing field, connect those rail lines, especially the DFC, build those roads, dredge those channels and rivers, and leave it to the market to get on with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. You have summed up all the issues that are around the infrastructure game. Shankar? So freight forwarding community is one of the very large, important community in the entire logistics supply chain. So currently we are talking about the infrastructure gaps and how this ambitious plans the Prime Minister is having, how will it change the landscape. You're on mute.
Yeah, the host was not allowing me to unmute. That was
okay. Now,
thanks.
so please go ahead.
It's okay. Yes, I'm able to now. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ram Prasad. Thanks for organizing this event, creating this platform, which is very important in today's time to have this platform, because interactive and dialogues will surely take a message to the trade to benefit the trade. Thanks to all the speakers for the input, and it has been a good sessions throughout the day. I would just refer to the point which you have made it to me. One is with Mr. Abhishek sir. When we are talking about the Gati Shakti, the whole concept flow, which we have been driving this initiative from AAFA and other forums, also with the government of India, as to the importance of logistics, because economy, the backbone is completely dependent upon the logistics. So the economy success is completely on logistics connectivity. And if you have good connectivity, good infrastructure in logistics, I think so trade will take its place. The demand and supplies will always be there. And there is a differentiation of demand and supply when you call it into trade and into the logistics infrastructure. The whole concept is derived out of this Gati Shakti was from the examples to give. If you find, we had the JNPT, but the connectivity was always a challenge. Access to the JNPT port terminals, developing terminals upon terminals, but then the access to the terminals we had already experienced. And in fact, the Nhava Sheva or the JNPT terminal always had a good experience about the Bombay Port Trust. Where we came out from Bombay Port Trust was a good reason because of the congestion and the connectivity. And after coming here also, which initiative has been taken today would have been appreciated had it been 20 years back. Because it was very easy during that time to have this infrastructure developed, connectivity developed. Now, why this Gati Shakti is taking place, it's a good initiative. We really appreciate, we really acknowledge the Prime Minister's message to the country with inaugurating this Gati Shakti. The dwell time and the transaction cost. But dwell time is every time adding on to the transaction cost. Now, what is the dwell time study also when we do? It is not in isolation by itself when we say the whole transaction. Local, every logistics service provider in the whole supply chain system and the infrastructure cost of the warehousing cost. Now, even the logistics cost, which they say in India, is also challengeable at what level they are talking, whether it is domestic level or it is international supply chain level. This needs to be studied in little more in different dynamics and different aspects. So the whole concept work around the dwell time and the transaction cost. Supply, yes, when we have the trade, when we have the supply from on one side and the demand from other side, it is all depending upon the movement of cargo. And suddenly see a spurge because of this COVID-19. Yes, there has been challenges which is lot spoken throughout these sessions. And I would not like to dwell upon it. We have gone through that experiences as to why there has been a spurge in the freight rates and how to tackle these issues from time to evacuation of the ports, the evacuation of the CFS model is in place. It is very difficult to achieve this challenge in the logistics sector. So one is connectivity and the compliances. When it comes to compliances also, it is a regulatory authority which has to be adhered to, and more of the facilitation measures which customs has really taken a great move, because we could find during this COVID-19 has taught us a lot to come from electronic EDI systems, and a lot of development took place. Before even the trade could think about introducing something or recommending something, the customs on their own came out with some notifications and some notices to facilitate the trade. So that was a really great initiative by customs on the first time which we have observed on the IT platforms. So we could see that there should be no idle time, and the transaction cost should be reduced on every part of the pricing, which will help this demand and supply to be consistency. And ease of doing business. Now, ease of doing business come on to various aspects, and that is why we have this logistics division created with the government. It is the first time that the government has taken initiative to create a separate division for this special logistics, appointing a special logistics secretary. And now, when we came to this evacuation, the government, the customs came out with the introduction of DPD, which really worked out. So this is how the initiative takes forward to get evacuation processes instead of going via CFS's evacuation direct from port, and then the traffic control on this, which is a dual traffic, gets reduced to the 50% of its traffic, because to and fro traffic itself, when you control, it brings to 50% of the traffic control on the roads. So this cooperations on within the ports, within the stakeholders of other sectors also play a very important role, and everybody should say in the facilitation part where they can increase, they can make revenue on the volumes rather than on the per unit basis. So the volumes will make the industry grow. Volumes will make them the role model sustain. So this is how we see. And during this COVID, we find that in logistics sector, even the e-platform could not give that support. Even the e-platform also failed after a certain aspect. So it was a really challenge. But still we survived, and now it is a lot seen to be getting back into consistence and back into falling into line of the requirements. And shortly we will really see. Now we have already started seeing that the prices of the freights have started coming down. So there is a free movement which we could experience now. Thank you. You are muted, sir. You need to unmute.
Thank you. Subsequent to Mr. Aditya Chaudhary's comments on the rollout plan of Gati Shakti, a host of issues have come on fore. Mike spoke about how the investment needs to be protected, how the development of infrastructure should be left to the market forces. Umesh Grover said about the CFS is an integral part of the infrastructure and then it needs to survive. And Shankar has opened up other logistic challenges that are there. Now, let me come back to Abhishek ji. You spoke about how the infrastructure gap areas will be thought over, mapped, and then bridged by this Gati Shakti plan. Now, NLDS is also into providing a lot of this digital data for bringing logistics efficiency. So my question is, let us talk about soft infrastructure as well, in addition to the physical infrastructure. So how is it being utilized or being rolled out to bring efficiency? Is it integrated with the existing several platforms that are there? And then even Ministry of Commerce is also planning about national logistics portal. So if you can give some insights into that, then we can move on to the other issues.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi. I appreciate the comments from Mike, Umeshji, Shankar Saab, and all the other fellow members. The software intervention part of it, as you're aware that we have implemented initially a logistic data bank project, whereby we were monitoring the movement of the containers. We were tracking each and every single container moving out of the port. So as a second version of logistic data bank, LDB 2.0, as you rightly said, it's very important to provide efficiencies to the overall trade. The systems which are being run by different organizations, different bodies, different agencies, different departments, they should start talking to each other. And that is the reason this mandate was given to us way back in January 2020 by Niti Aayog to develop a unified logistic interface platform, which we consider is as LDB 2.0. So I'm very happy to inform that out of nearly 16 odd systems of various ministries, we are in a position to integrate our systems through an API-based link with most of them. Recently, there's a committee which has been constituted under the chairmanship of Secretary Shipping for the purpose of tackling the situation of empty containers and the price rise which everyone was talking about. Umesh ji is one of the members of that committee and we are seeking his support. In fact, yesterday only I have signed 3 letters addressing Mr. Umesh to help us in putting up the data region-wise, ICD-wise, CFS-wise for the purpose of mapping on a geotag basis where the empty containers are lying. So, for example, Ministry of Road Transport is presently having 3 different systems. One is called Vahan, which tracks the movement of the container and which certifies the vehicle details. The second is Sarthi, which gives you the information about the driver and the validation about his driving license, etc. And the third system is a FASTag. Similarly, Ministry of Civil Aviation is having 2 systems on their own, Air Cargo Community System and Unavailable System. Then DGFT has Importer-Exporter Code. Then Port Community System of IPA, which is 1X and which is again getting upgraded. Then you have terminal operating systems of different terminal operators working across the length and breadth of the country. Then you have IceGate system of customs. Then you have GSTN. So there are multiple systems which are operating in the current scenario. And to our surprise, there is no common layer, there is no API which has ever been attempted to link these systems or to make these systems talk at the back end. So what we have done in the past 9 months, we have developed an API whereby on a single portal eventually, all these systems will be talking at the back end. So you have, for the particular consumer or a stakeholder, the single portal will provide the visibility and it will fetch data from whatever systems being run by different ministries. We are not getting or we are not posing our nose into the individual systems of various ministries, but through an API-based link, we have created an integrated platform whereby for a user or for a stakeholder, this can all be done. this is in the final stages of testing, and probably in a month's time or so, we should be in a position to officially roll it out. So this is what I can mention. A lot of hard work has been done, and there was a lot of reservations because the way we have brought in transparency and visibility in the movement of containers, as well as we have started in the very initial stages of logistic data bank project, whereby we have started naming and shaming various CFSs, various port operators, ranking them on a monthly basis in terms of their efficiencies, their dwell time, etc., etc. And this is all backed by the factual data. Similarly, there were a lot of reservations when we started collating this information, when we started requesting to share an open API. Most of the players were very non-responsive, and still I'm struggling with many of them. They were not ready to share, quoting reasons of confidentiality, quoting reasons of secrecy, quoting reasons of their agreements. But if as a trade, if as a country, we have to reduce, everybody talks about 14%, 15% logistic cost to the GDP, and it should be in single digit. But what are we doing? Whenever it comes to decision making, we are just thinking about our organization, thinking about our core mandate, thinking about our individual role. As a country, as a macro picture, nobody is talking about anything. Everybody is just there to complain. So I'm sorry to say, but everybody is like fearing a lot from sharing the data in a transparent manner, because they think that if that is being shared or it is being publicized or if it is being analyzed, then definitely it is going to just clearly shows how inefficiently the system is working. So we are trying to integrate all the systems put together at one level, and probably in a month or so, once my testing, etc., is done, it should go live.
Thank you, Abhishek ji. Anyone would like to comment on that?
Can I?
Yes, Umesh ji.
Thank you, Abhishek ji. I think we've had quite a bit of interaction, and I know that you all are doing an excellent job on this one. We both, as CFSCI and NSCFS, jointly had interactive meetings with you all. And all our submission was that we have been, initially the Ministry of Shipping had come and in the year 2018, and we all were asked to do integration with the Port Community System, PCS 1.0x, for which our members worked closely, all the ICDs, all the ports, terminals, and they did a good progress. And then came the pandemic, and there was a delay. And most of the CFSs, our members, at least I can vouch that they spent a considerable amount. Sorry,
I'm just talking to someone.
Yeah. So basically, they have all spent a sizable amount trying to develop API integrations, which they have developed, and they should be able to receive the data from the customs and from the other stakeholders. But regrettably, what happened was customs were not initially sharing the data. Exactly what Abhishek ji has mentioned, that fearing their confidentiality of the data and the of the national importance, because it involves the security of the country. So they asked for development of some firewalls. So all that, I believe, was done. Now our members' only concern has been that if we are being asked to share data with multiple agencies of the government, it's going to be expensive. And in case we are all linked with PCS 1.0x, let's make that operational. And if Logistics Data Bank just is able to extract all the data from PCS 1.0x, which is already developed, I think that will resolve a lot of problems. So far, what was planned was we share this data on the email, which to some extent our members have a little reservation that sharing their data on email may not be very secure. That's the only delay from our end. Otherwise, we are all willing to cooperate. We are a part of the system, and we would love to be tracked. let's be honest, because a CFS, I'll just give you one example. No custodian can delay a container. If an importer comes to take delivery, our process times is not more than 6 to 8 hours. Maximum, we got a flow chart. And we want these containers to move out ASAP. Yes, earlier there was lethargy in the trade and there was lot of storage required. And which was, okay, we took that opportunity and our members made substantial money on that because their infrastructure costs got recovered because storage is one of the activities. But so if it is not there, we will handle more containers. We are happy that because ultimately the national interest is more important. All of us are interested in bringing down the dwell time and the logistics costs. So we are all here to cooperate. And none of us, sorry, just one second, sir, just let me complete. So CFSs have no interest whatsoever to delay any containers. In fact, we've been taking up with customs on a daily basis. We went to Delhi, we met the CBIC, we also met the CBIC chairman, and we said there are 25,000 odd containers stuck all over, which are under some litigation, some amount, but others are through investigating agencies like SIIB or CIU or something, which are there for 20 years. And we say that these containers, these investigating agencies also should have a time frame to work on, and they also should be held accountable. We would all be very happy to cooperate, sir. We would be happy that containers come in and move out, we get more volumes, and we will survive on that. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ravi, can I make a point?
Please.
I completely understand and appreciate the pain which Mr. Grover and the entire trade must be having of dealing with multiple government agencies and providing the data and receiving the integration request from n number of entities taking the government flag into their hands. I completely understand and appreciate that pain. If I have been into your shoes, I would be thoroughly confused whether I should look for and wait for National Logistic Policy, or I should look for LPPT, or I should look for PCS1, PCS1X, or ULIP, or LDB. Who is the dealing hand? I don't know. I completely appreciate that pain. But the wisdom or the kind of mandate which the government has given to us is that we don't have a choice. If you recall, in the last meeting, it was pressed upon us that you should get all the data, as you rightly mentioned, through PCS. But after drilling it down, it came to understand that the data is not getting loaded into the PCS. So the option is either we should wait for that to function, which can be an unending wait, or devise a mechanism to do something which can at least starting and splitting some kind of a information which is absolutely critical in the present circumstances of the increase in the container rates. So the email point was just like a kind of a stopgap arrangement till the time the actual integration with PCS happens and the PCS system is stuck. We have already integrated our systems with PCS long back. For me, why I will go and hunt for each and every single CFS and request for your support and cooperation if PCS is in a position to feed me the data? I will be the most happiest person. Rather than connecting 100 dots, I will connect which is already connected. One dot, I'm already aligned with PCS. No point of going and hunting for 100 CFSs. But the problem is the main link, which is PCS, that is not capturing the data properly. Because of which I have to go to the next layer of CFSs and request them with my folded hands that please give me the data so that I can inform shipping ministry what is the total volume of empty containers lying in each CFS, lying in Maharashtra region, lying in Gujarat region, closer to Pipavav, Kandla, Mundra or JNPT, so that the whole situation and the problem which our country is presently facing, not only our country is facing, which is a global scenario right now, that can get resolved to an extent. We are not going to resolve it completely, as you know very well, but to an extent, whatever we can contribute. That is the only precise point.
Very well appreciated, Abhishek. I appreciate what you mentioned, sir.
Thank you. Now let me bring in Mr. Satish Kumar Reddy, who joined a little late. who is a consultant and a trade facilitation regional cooperation working with the Asian Development Bank with over 22 years of working in Government of India in policy formulation, designing, implement laws, procedures, and 7 years of consulting experience with the ADB. He's well versed with the foreign trade policy, customs valuation. Satish Kumar Reddy, welcome. Are you there, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Satish, we can hear you. We can't see you. I think you have a problem in video.
Yeah, I'm traveling, so there's a bit of a problem with the video.
That's okay. So I will quickly come to the point because we have discussed extensively on other issues. Since you have a lot of experience in customs and customs-related issues, so one thing that Captain Umesh Grover mentioned is not sharing data. So what is the customs approach in sharing data? Second thing, my question is, there is a lot of digitalization happening on the from the side of customs department. Initially, they have been very proactive, and then a lot of transformational laws have been brought in, faceless assessment and all that. But one complaint I keep hearing is there is too much of regulation, too much of burden through all these processes also. So what is the realistic scenario? Can you explain?
Yeah, thank you. And just greetings to all the fellow panelists. So I'm initially, just at the outset, very happy to again hear about an elaboration on the Gati Shakti master plan from Mr. Aditya Chaudhary. In the past, various ministries had come out with their own initiatives like the Sagarmala or the logistics wing of the commerce. And one issue that I used to see is that everybody said we will coordinate the working of the other players in the international trade supply chain. So at one point I felt, that there are far too many ministries who wanted to coordinate others and hardly anyone who wanted to be coordinated by others. So I hope that this Gati Shakti being driven by the highest office would also remove this issue of this coordination fascination that each ministry had and bring more coherence. I also agree with the point made about kind of multiple single windows, if I may use the phrase, that have emerged. And it's a great news to hear that there's going to be an API and these will talk to each other. Coming back to the customs processes, thank you for mentioning about the digitization initiatives. So I was with Indian Customs for about 22-23 years. And the pandemic really kind of exposed the chinks in the digitization, though everybody thought that we had digitized enough. In a scenario where employees could not even travel to reach the office, the actual gaps in digitization were kind of immediately exposed. But I was happy to note that steps were also taken to plug those gaps. And also customs today has been given a directive from higher levels that the facilitation levels should reach close to 90%, give or take 1 or 2%, which means that so much of cargo should not be inspected, no physical or intrusive inspections in so much. And customs is close to achieving that figure. There are, of course, other agencies like the Food Safety Organization, Quarantine, etc., who require inspections. So if they could also be, if this philosophy of risk management could also be infused in them, then I think this figure is easily achievable, and there would be very few pain points, at least at the stage of cargo clearance. And worldwide also, the philosophy is that the compliance checks are done either pre-clearance or pre-arrival or post-clearance. So you have the filings, the manifest, the various declarations, the application of the risk management engine. All this happens prior to arrival of the cargo at the port, so that by the time the cargo reaches the port, the treatment it should be accorded is already decided, and which in over 80% of the cases would be to release it. And in the rest of the cases where some testing certification may be needed, or some very few sensitive cargo and more intrusive inspection may be needed, but rest of the compliance checks are done post clearance. So what this will bring in very soon, in the very near future, is a regulatory ecosystem where the cargo on arrival would be ready to go out. And that's where I think the ports and the various allied facilities like the CFS's ICD should be geared to handle this, where the cargo should not dwell in those facilities for a long time. The checks are done either pre-arrival or post-clearance. I'm sure this is where we are moving. I'm talking of the trend, of course. Anecdotally, there will always be a few cases where there were delays, but this is definitely going to be a trend. I know that it is being monitored from pretty high levels, and this will be achieved. And this is how the logistics sector should also shape up to be in tune with this, that it should not be that when all the compliance checks are done, but the cargo is still lying in the port or ICD due to other reasons. And this is where I think private sector efficiency has also needs to be seen. It's strange that in our country, even pre-arrival filing, which we think is in the interest of private sector, even that had to be enforced by customs through penalties, that if you don't file in advance, we'll penalize you. If you don't, take out your car, pay duties and take out your cargo in certain time, we'll penalize you. Intuitively, this is supposed to be in private sector interest, but it's being partly enforced through penal measures. But I think overall, there is the trend is very clear. This will be the future, and everybody should adjust to this new normal. One last point is that I think CBIC had also come up with a new ICD and CFS policy about 7-8 months back, I think in December 2020. I haven't heard any comment from the private sector here. It does streamline a lot of the old, there were fragmented instructions which have been merged, and one coherent policy circular has been issued. So to that extent, it's good. But my personal feeling is also that it's a touch over prescriptive in trying to decide where the facilities will be commercially viable and where they should come up and where they should not come up. I don't know whether the industry has taken that issue with the CBIC, but this is a welcome step, but with this shortcoming. So let me stop here, and if there are any further questions later on, I can take. Thank you.
Yes, Umesh ji.
Thank you, Mr. Ramprasad. Satish, you have very well summarized. Yes, we appreciate what the customs have done in the last 5-6 years is unprecedented. From the role of a regulator, they are turning to a facilitator. And let me tell you, the private sector has responded very well. And each company, each terminal, everybody is working to full efficiency and nobody wants to delay the cargo at all. It's a mindset of the importer which has to change, because the type of cargo, like I mentioned earlier, Padma, whether you had joined that time, there is about 30 to 35% cargo is a very low valued cargo. These, especially your HMS heavy melting scrap, this one is a commodity where the prices fluctuate, and these are all punters. They import the cargo, and if the scrap value has come down, they just dump it. So where's the question of they're paying the duty or anything? They dump these sort of cargoes. Otherwise, yes, the customs are doing a wonderful thing. All their initiatives. My friend Shankar Shinde, the chairman of FFAI, and who's so closely associated, will be able to speak volumes on their achievements. There's no two ways about it. And the whole country, everyone, the private sector is aligned. Secondly, the policy which was brought by Circular 50/2020 in November, all private, both NSCFS, CFSAI have represented. On that time, we've had meetings with the CBIC, that there are certain issues, yes, they have aligned everything, but they have not taken the stakeholders' views before forming this policy. And these need to be a lot of tweaking is required to be done by putting orange, red or green that you can't have any further CF in that area. I think you have to leave it to the trade. They understand their business. They understand the future. This Abhishek had mentioned right in the beginning that now with the new ports coming in, the infrastructure should also keep coming in. If you put a stop at these CFSs and ICDs, new ports and new terminals with the your freight corridor coming in, you will be short of terminals because the policy doesn't let you build them. Thank you.
Thank you, Umesh ji.
Thank you.
Whenever Umesh ji on the panel is a solid defender of CFS business, so he continues to argue on behalf of CFSs. Thank you very much, sir, for your input. Shankar, I'll just come back to you. Mike, I have to ask one question. Mike, morning we were discussing about the container trade, and we didn't have a terminal representative. So the one question I wanted to ask is, how do you see the supply chain disruption? And even during the pandemic, I have seen the numbers. Your terminal has performed well. So how is the current scenario? How is the dwell time at your terminal? What are the delays globally that are happening? How are they affecting the schedules at your terminal? Just can you give me an insight? And
I have my okay, in terms of what the effects are, as I said, vessels are horrendously off schedule, but we're able to actually handle the vast majority, even when the vast majority are off schedule. And that is also, credit to the ecosystem and everyone working with us to make that happen in terms of evacuating the boxes on time and so on. We're not seeing any particular big increase in dwell time at all. I think Umesh made a very good point that we often hear about this. Get the turnaround time down. As a terminal, we want the containers also to go out as fast as possible, but the importer may not want to take them, or there may be some other issue there. So sometimes the things that you do and the capabilities you have, you're not actually allowed to demonstrate, because that's not what a reasonable size of the trade wants. Now, in terms of the rest of the world, particularly I think in the US and some of the Southeast Asian ports as well, there's some quite big holdups. So what that's meaning is then it's like a blocked drain sometimes. You get or London buses, you get nothing for a while, then all 6 come at once. And we're seeing so many void calls in India as well, which also then disrupts the rest of the supply chain in terms of where all of the boxes go. I think Satish made a few very interesting points and introduced me to some new words: coordination, fascination, and multiple single windows. I think the resilience that the trade has shown has been superb, at least in terms of joining hands, to support each other. Then we all step back and say we're going to go digital. And then also, as Satish said, your shortcomings will be exposed pretty quickly if they're not there. So I think it comes down to, not just the great human resilience that's been demonstrated, but also the corporate resilience, particularly on the digital side. And as we move forward and we're talking about all of these new systems and linkages, well, that's great. But ultimately, I'd always argue for simplification and removal of as much regulation as possible, because there seems to be so much innovation or innovative energy that's focused towards dealing with these myriad of regulations and requirements. If we could take those away, all of that innovation could actually be unleashed to really turbocharge, the trade and economic development.
Thank you, Mike. Shankar Shindeji, are you there?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I have. You wanted to say something, and I also have one question. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Ramprasad. Actually, one part which comes over here is very important. On the customs part, we have already seen the facilitation measures. In fact, they are a step ahead. They want to introduce the SCMTR in the rightful manner and in the true spirit. And it is the trade who has to come forward and support this initiative of customs to have the facilitation measures in the right way. Or even if they are talking about the RMS facilitation measures also, share the data. Every data and everything is available anywhere else, unless it is something which you are doing something which is beyond the fair practices, it will be a confidential thing. So I think so with this NLP platform which is coming up, and the NLP platform which the latch-on is available, all the trade members should come forward and share the data on that, which is everything is covered under encryption system, and they are signing the NDAs also. So I think so, and it is not applicable in India. If you go beyond India, if you see the international practices also, all these data, all these systems in the e-platform are working very nicely and very improved spirit when they are sharing the whole systems. But why it is not happening in India, as rightly what Mr. Abhishek said, that everybody blames and saying that confidentially and we do not want to share. We really lack on that will part on the trade members. It may be logistics stakeholders or it may be trade members who should come on the platform willingly and to share everything with open-minded. We are really failing today, even getting the e-invoicing. Mr. Grover, I'm not getting the individual, but let us be very fair. Today also we are failing in spite of government initiatives, customs initiative to say that e-invoicing is the way we have to move forward. Till now we have not been able to get even a simple trade to expedite the matter. So where do we stand today? You know, the willingness comes with all these things. It is very simple. At least what is doable, we should start with it, and we should take it in the next step. If we are not going to start, it is never going to come up. You know, so let us think in a positive way, and this is how I think we should take it forward. And various measures being supported by government, we should be supporting the government initiatives to have the logistics cost down and just not blame. Because it is none of my role or something. We have to play that important role in contribution to the government's initiative. This is a way forward I see for the development of logistics and the economy in the.
Thank you, Shankar. Very sensible. My question to Mr. Satish Kumar. Satish Kumar, you also have a lot of experience in cross-border aspects of transport and logistics and e-commerce. So in the data that we have collected in association with the Drury, we have seen the more growth of the container trade happened in the last 1 year in the South Asia region. But at the same time, there is a huge potentiality among South Asian nations, but the cross-border trade has a lot of issues in terms of policy, in some terms of trade facilitation or cargo movement. So anything being done on that front?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I do agree that even if you take India, the kind of efficiencies that are being brought in at ports and air cargos, etc., the same has not really percolated down to the land borders. And most of the trade in South Asia happens through the land borders. Of course, not with Sri Lanka and Maldives, but among the BBIN countries. So the land borders suffer both from infrastructural deficiencies, though of course we have the Land Port Authority of India who's been mandated to develop infrastructure. But I think in close to 9 years, they have developed 6 or 7 locations, which I think is a very modest speed of development. So most places there's very poor infrastructure, and the infrastructure deficiency has a major impact on process efficiency as well. I've been involved in this overland trade and South Asia for over 15 years, and I can vouch for that infrastructure does negatively impact the processes also. Secondly, as I said, particularly for a big country like India, whose maybe 2-3% of its trade is with land neighbors, the kind of focus that is given on introducing reforms in ports or air cargos is not the same amount of focus, is not extended to land borders. I personally have fought for it a lot, and there is now much improvement over about, for example, in case of India, 44 of our land custom stations are now automated. But some years back, there was no assured electricity or a proper building to automate the processes. But today, situation is vastly different. On the containerization, again, I agree that while the trade with the rest of the world is largely containerized, the trade among the South Asian countries is hardly containerized. It's mostly done in open trucks. In my experience, various reasons have been cited, including the cost. But again, infrastructure-wise also, where most of the land custom stations are not geared to handle containerized movement and the turnaround, etc. Secondly, on the soft side, containerization would really benefit the trade if clearances were to be allowed inland. The benefit of having a container is that it should be able to cross the border and go into an ICD or any inland facility where the clearance should be able to take place. If a container has to be de-stuffed at the border and stuffed onto a vehicle of the other country, then all the advantages are lost. And this is where there is some lagging here. Unlike India, which has a lot of ICDs and dry ports, the other countries, Bangladesh has one, I think Nepal has one and is developing a second one, and Bhutan has none. So a development of inland clearance facilities would also, in my view, give a kick to the containerization, because then you importers and exporters can see the benefit of clearance at their approximate or doorstep rather than at the border. So process as well as these infra issues, I think together would solve this. But I do admit that the pace of improvement is much slower at the land borders, but I'm very hopeful, and my current work also involves specifically these very things that, and I'm working on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Satish. So we have 10 to 12 minutes remaining, and I have one question each to the panelists so that we can wind up on time. Question to Umesh Groverji. Sir, you have talked about the sustenance and survival of container freight stations. So what is the best business strategy that now CFSs can adopt to still remain in the supply chain and then survive?
Thank you, Mr. Ramprasad. I think a very relevant question, which we in fact also have been discussing among ourselves. And number one, what has changed in these 6 years? Let us just try and understand how the business has changed. One is like increase in DPD, which is good, because if the end customer is paying less, lesser dwell time and lesser transaction cost, very good. But today also CFSs are flooded with the volumes. They are not flooded, I would say they got reasonably same number of volumes, only the revenue is less. And the trade still prefers to evacuate through CFSs, and the terminals also prefer CFS to evacuate because what is known as en bloc evacuation. Secondly, most of these even big companies like IKEA or Skoda or Amazon, etc., or the other factories, they would prefer to use CFSs as a first-class warehouse, bonded warehouse, where things are lying secured. You pay 300, 400, 500 rupees a day ground rent for a 32 cubic feet cargo in a secured manner with custom security and everything. But for CFSs to sustain, these revenues are not enough. And we've done a lot of this study, and which shows that if we are allowed to handle the domestic cargo, a lot of domestic cargo by creating virtual boundaries. Customs tell you make a separate gate, you make a separate demarcate, and which is not required. The ports are doing both domestic and international cargo within the same boundary and with the same. These are virtual boundaries, the systems are available, which can be done, number one. Number two, if MSME activities, not the ones which are only environment friendly, if they are allowed to be done, I think it makes a lot of value addition, because these are the very strategic location of the CFSs will assist these small-time manufacturers to have their goods moved out faster. Barcoding, packaging, repackaging, and anything that could be done in a, say, multimodal logistics park. Now, multimodal logistics parks have not, or FTWCs have not been a success in India because they were set up at a huge cost. They are too large. So any CFS which is more than 25 acres land may be considered, if they got surplus land, allow them to do that. And lastly, also they could be used as an air freight stations. The idea is that government should utilize the infrastructure belongs to the nation. no matter who makes it. PSA makes a terminal, after 30 years they give it, it becomes the property of the nation. Any private developer develops the CFS or ICD, ultimately it's a national asset. So an asset which is already there, which has been created at 100, 200 crores, it has given employment to 30, 40,000 people in there collectively, that should be allowed to stay, and there should be way to utilize this existing infrastructure rather than focusing on making new infrastructure, which is going to take time. Here's a ready-made first-class infrastructure available. We would be engaging a consultant also to do the mapping that what all best can be done and go with a concrete plan to the government. We have already approached the government, but we also want to be sure that what we can do there actually, we sort of close the gaps and then we go with a more concrete plan. Thank you, Mr. Ramprasad.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike, out of the throughput that is being handled at the terminals, MTS also now has a major share, major percentage of the throughput is handling of MTs. And yeah, we had a lot of imbalance between exports and imports. So MTs repositioning has been a major issue, and the lines have been bringing a lot of MTs and repositioning, as well as bringing in new containers as well. So how is the scenario at terminals on the equipment shortage, and how are you handling it?
I mean, ultimately, as a terminal, we just see a container, whether it's full or empty. Doesn't make a difference, and there's certainly plenty of space within the terminals. What we've been doing is actually trying to help the trade. So, for example, now we actually have CFSs that will truck boxes into the railhead, just like you can see behind me, and then reposition that empty to the hinterland rather than trucking it out. So it gets to the hinterland to be reloaded for an export faster, and particularly with some of the incentives that Indian Railways and the CTOs have given, it becomes cheaper. Practically, things that we'd like to do, for example, and this comes back to talking about working with concessionaires, to cope with changes. For example, developing empty-free pools under the TAMP type situations, which is also add value to the liners. But we ourselves, obviously we know the numbers, but we don't see a material difference in our operations, whether it's laden or empty.
Thank you. Shankar? Can you hear me, Shankarji?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So this question is to the freight forwarding community through you, being the chairman of the association. Now, ports, terminals, and carriers started providing end-to-end services, right from trade finance to the customs-related issues, the transportation, all the digitization, paperwork, everything end-to-end. And this we have been discussing for some time, that this will eliminate the other links in the supply chain. So how do you see this? In the morning debate, we had that the freight forwarders have to improve their efficiency and become more competitive. So as a freight forwarding community, how do you see this scenario evolving?
It's a good question. I will not talk about this question in the end-to-end solution. I think so. We welcome them all. We cannot stop anybody from getting into any of the businesses. If you go 25 years back, we used to have these lines doing the consolidation business, the lines doing all the activities. But after a time, you have seen that they burned their hands and they went out of this, and they had to concentrate on the main business of the liner business, and they have sale containers only. So it's the same thing. See, this is a complete different area, logistics area. It is not that easy what it is perceived from outside, though there are facilitation measures coming in, but compliances are being increasing at the same time when the facilitation measures are coming into the system. It doesn't happen that only facilitation compliances up to that levels are increasing from day to day time, which is becoming more important and sensitive. Today, it cannot be happen that the uneducated person or the low education person can come in. A lot of upgradation or skill development is required in this sector, and the innovation, the innovations in logistics is required. What you rightly said, has to be given in the different way. The thought process is a complete different way, which has to be brought in, and there is a limitations when such people come and they perceive from that direction, because it is an end-to-end customer. It is a personal understanding of the of this supply chain, which requires tailor-made services, and that is a more important service which any importer, exporter, or trade will look after, and not has a service finance. Okay, finance is today available. I don't think so. It's a major challenge in today's time. If somebody comes with a finance trade, that is nothing. It is comparable, and it is welcome move that whoever wants. It is not by compulsion but by choice. That today it is a buying market. It is not a selling market. So by that way, that is not an competitive advantage where the trade will look for have a joint venture with any of the main terminal port operators or something, but it will have its own way of having an competitive edge to take upon the businesses. So we are, and everything will revolve around the custom brokers, where the custom brokers around, he is the person who will be our core competence to have these logistics services provided to the trade as per the tailor-made requirement of the customers, because there are complete different requirement of the customers when it comes to, it is not a single way. Once it is the draft, it is drafted and it goes in the same pipeline. No, it is not the way the system works. So it is a welcome for them. If they want to try, please try, do so. Once the trade experience, it will again come back to us only. So we are not really worried about it. It's a life cycle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shankarji. That is a very positive approach that you have. So, gentlemen, that's all I have time for this session. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing a lot of insights into policy-related issues, infrastructure, soft infrastructure, and regulatory-related issues. Thank you, Mike. Had a wonderful time with all of you. Thank you, Umeshji, Shankar, and thank you, Mr. Satish Kumar, who is online, and my thanks to Abhishek Chaudhary, who had to log out early. Thank you very much. I request
pleasure being
the participants to keep logged in. We have another interesting session on the South Asia scenario, what is happening in the neighborhood, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. That session will be moderated by Rohan, our good friend, and the session will commence with a break of 5 to 10 minutes for the arrangements. Then we can relax. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.